Hello everyone, welcome back to Purposeful Armament. Today we're going to be doing a walkthrough of Tennessee Exodus 2025. Now keep in mind, this is our first shooting competition, so there are some things that didn't go 100% to plan, but rest assured, if you are watching this in the future to get a better understanding of the shooting experience that Exodus offers, this will be a pretty good baseline. So we're going to start with kind of the day before and our setup, and then we'll get into the actual runs that everybody did during the competition. Now, we showed up the day before to set everything up, and there was a lot of work to do. We had to build out all of the target stands and put targets on them. We had to build out all of the walls, all of the banners. There was quite a lot to do. And to be quite frank, the property was not in the condition that we were told it was going to be in, so we did have to pull some audibles and unfortunately cut one of the stages. But other than those little hiccups, the setup went super well. And we also continued the morning of the actual competition with, finalizing the spray paint and all of that kind of fun stuff. Now, every Exodus event will start with a safety brief at either 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock in the morning. Everybody is responsible for reading the rules and understanding the rules before they arrive at the event, but this safety brief is a good way to double check that everyone is on the same page. We cover a lot of the basics, like the fact you have to be completely self-sufficient during the event, the physicality of the event, as well as carrying a rifle with a chamber flag, and other safety protocols. We also cover the 180-degree rule, which is common in many shooting sports, to prevent unsafe handling of your firearm. Once our quick safety brief is done, we give everybody a few more minutes to manage their loadout, make sure that they have everything on, and then we fall out to the first stage. Now, in this particular event, we got lucky in the fact that we only had one squad, but in the future, as the event grows, we will have multiple squads, which means people will be shooting different stages at the same time. Obviously, we were constrained by the layout of this particular property. Now, before each stage, typically, we allow the shooters to walk the stage to be able to see where targets are at and how they want to take on the particular stage, and we also give an in-depth brief of how the stage is going to be completed. Now, Exodus, just like many other brutality style shooting competitions, does have a fairly strict procedure when completing these drills. We tried to make all of our stages as open-ended as possible to allow the shooter to develop a plan on how to complete the stage the fastest way, but in a lot of cases with all of the physicality, it can be quite difficult, but that is something we will work on in the future. Now we are finally at the first stage of the event. This is a classic in brutality style matches. This is the Casarda drill, and if that's trademarked, it's a kettlebell throwing drill. So as you can see, the shooter will pick up the kettlebell and throw it, then pick the rifle up and advance to the kettlebell's new position. Once they're at that new position, they're then going to engage 3 targets downrange and repeat the process. This will continue on until they get to the finish line. Once the kettlebell is thrown past the finish line, the shooter is going to drop their magazine and take one shot onto a HVT. If they miss this shot, it's a penalty. Now that the rifle is rendered, for all intents and purposes, safe and clear, it is going to be deposited into the safety box, or a safety pallet in this case. The shooter is then going to advance to finish out the stage with their pistol. They must then clear the small shoot house at the very end to finish out the drill. Now, a couple things about this drill while you see some other people shooting it. This was a very particularly long Casarda drill. In the future, we do want to shrink this down a little bit, as well as the fact that we use cardboard targets for the rifle portion of the drill. Realistically, using steel targets would be much better because, well, we wouldn't have to sit down and grade. The way that we had it set up is to ensure that people didn't miss the target. We had to have one RSO basically counting how many times the kettlebell was thrown so that we knew how many times the person was engaging the targets, in which case we can multiply it by 2, and that's how many shots should be on each target. So as you can hear, it's kind of complicated. So in the future, we'll definitely simplify this, make this a little bit smaller. Now you are also probably noticing that the pistol is unloaded. In this particular case, we weren't sure how everyone was going to perform the drill. In most cases of the Casarda drill, you do have to drop into the prone. While I do think that a pistol is 100% safe while it is in the holster, there were some people running passive retention holsters, which is not explicitly outlawed in the rule set. And as of that, we thought it would probably be best if people are dropping into the prone to not have them have a loaded pistol that could potentially fall out. But we will consider adjustments to that rule as needed. Now, since this bay was freshly dug and it had rained a couple of days beforehand, it wasn't particularly muddy, but it definitely was not dry. So the kettlebell oftentimes did not really roll forward. It kind of just stopped right where it was at. And we are using a 35-pound kettlebell. Now, again, the Casarda drill is a classic, so some variation of this drill will be present in basically every Exodus match that we do, if not more than once. So make sure that you are at least prepared for a similar drill to this. Next drill, we have the tire pull. Now, because of the layout of the competition and because we wanted to make sure that people were getting as much of a bang for their buck, literally, as possible, we decided to put a secondary stage on the same bay. The procedure for this drill is as follows. The shooter is going to be using only the pistol on this particular stage. On the buzzer, they're going to pick up that tire and they're going to have to haul it all the way back about 50-55 yards. Once they deposit the tire past basically the finish line, they're then going to draw their pistol and run back down the bay, engaging targets as they go. Now, a lot of these targets are set up to be what I would consider specialty targets. So there are some that are just normal full-size silhouettes. However, you see that we have some that are just blacked out except for the heads, meaning that you have to headshot them. And the very last target actually has a series of hidden code words, I guess you could say, inside of small boxes. Now, at an earlier point in the day, particularly after stage 1, while we were making sure that stage 2 was ready to go, all of the participants had to run to a designated location and pick up what we were calling an intelligence card. Now, the reason for this is because we wanted to apply some problem solving and some critical thinking to our shooting competition. Not that that's not present in other shooting competitions, but since we didn't have the room to do really massive, super long stages that could just inherently, by the nature of their size, be somewhat confusing, we had to come up with other ways to challenge people mentally. That was done so using intelligence cards, which you will see in the next drill, but also in this particular drill. So it got people running before the tire pull, and then they had to remember the word that was on their card and engage that particular target. If they missed, they got a penalty. And of course, we had Tristan standing behind to flip the target around so that they couldn't cheat and prepare for the words beforehand. And the tire, even with the wheel in it, wasn't particularly heavy. It was just kind of awkward for people to carry around. And that's perfect for what we were going for in this competition. People oftentimes frequently run into things that are not necessarily heavy, but can be awkward for a single person to carry, especially to carry quickly. Now, this was the only stage where we actually occluded targets using paint, which basically means that we painted areas on the target that you couldn't shoot. And I think we're going to implement that quite a bit more in future events because it allows for more unique targets without having to buy separate targets from those standard USPSA silhouettes. I do think in the future it would be wise to add some sort of fault line along the edge of the course, just to make sure that people don't get too close and literally barrel stuff the targets as they're running past. The whole point of this drill is to get your heart rate up and then get you to kind of shoot while on the move. Shooting while on the move under normal conditions is kind of difficult for people. Shooting on the move while your heart rate is already up can be even more challenging. And like I said before, this stage isn't necessarily going to be one-to-one copy and pasted into our next event, but something very similar will be there. Now moving on to stage number 3. This one is a little bit of a doozy, so bear with me. I'm going to go through the procedure first as it's somewhat simple, and then we'll talk about some of the nuances of the drill, as well as why we have it in our competition and what to potentially expect in future competitions. So the procedure is pretty easy. As you can see, there are 4 cardboard targets that are color coordinated downrange. In between those 4 cardboard targets is a set of 3 steel targets. These are low percentage targets as well. Your pistol begins unloaded on the table. On the buzzer, the shooter will grab and load their pistol and shoot the target which color corresponds to the first color on their intel card they received during registration. After they have engaged that cardboard target twice, they are then required to get 1 shot on each steel target down the tree. After they have engaged all 3 steel targets, they will then place the pistol on the table and they have to move a 130-pound sandbag to the corresponding color location. So if blue is your first color, you engage the blue target, you engage all 3 steel targets, and then you move the beanbag to the blue square marked off with stakes. After you've moved the sandbag into that location, you then run back to the table and engage the next color and repeat the process until you have finished shooting the drill. Now, I can say that this was probably everyone's least favorite drill, but I think this is still something that is quite important. Now, number 1, your intelligence cards. Everybody got their intelligence cards during registration, and they are responsible for keeping those intelligence cards throughout the entirety of the shooting competition. In fact, I believe we had maybe 1 or 2 people who actually lost their cards, and luckily for them, a fellow participant picked them up and held onto them until they were needed again. There are no explicit rules against that. I'm more than okay with that. However, the RSO will not point out that you left your card. It is 100% your responsibility to maintain your intelligence card. Now, again, we wanted to implement this because, well, it's a clever way to get some, cognitive challenges built into the competition, but it also makes sure that you can keep track of stuff that you might pick up and that you might need in the field. And while, yeah, a small index card with some colors on it might not be something you would need to pick up in the field, you never know what you might find and need to hold on to. Now, as for the sandbag and the weight of the sandbag, this particular sandbag did not have any handles, but the real goal that we were trying to demonstrate is, imagine somebody who's in your group or in your squad. Chances are they probably weigh between, I don't know, maybe 180 to 220, 240 pounds, depending on how big the person is, how muscular they might be. And then on top of that, they're gonna have kit. They're gonna have gear, they're gonna have guns, they might have a backpack, a rucksack. What happens if they get injured? It might not be some crazy, Civil War type of thing. It might just be that you guys were on a hike and they broke their leg. You do have to be physically capable enough to to help someone if they need help. Now, yeah, the 130-pound sandbag might not be realistic to the weight of a human being. And yes, you know, if your friend gets injured, they're probably a little bit easier to pull than a sandbag just because of, well, they could stick out their arms and you would have handles, or, you know, their plate carrier might have handles, or etc., etc. Where we lacked weight, we made up for in difficulty in actually grabbing the bag. Now, in future events, we are probably still going to have something very similar to this. We might play with the weight of the bag a little bit. We might play with adding handles to the bag or something similar. But realistically, the only changes we're really going to make to a stage like this is going to be with the actual locations that people are depositing the bag to. It is a pretty difficult stage, but I think it encompasses a lot of things that are probably pretty valuable for you to have, especially given the type of competition and the type of preparedness that we push.
Moving on to the next stage of the day, we have the graveyard. Now, this stage was pretty interesting. This is actually the one stage of the day that we had everyone run blind, mainly because, as you'll see, it's kind of difficult and time consuming to do a walkthrough. The shooter is going to position themselves at the start line and make sure that all of their firearms are clear. On the buzzer, the shooter will then run through about a quarter mile of woods, following a trail to the shooting positions. Once they arrive at the shooting positions, there are 3 different positions to engage 3 targets from. Each position will engage the same 3 targets, and they will have to engage them all 3 times. So instead of the normal 2 shots, they're going to be engaging with 3 shots. Now, this might seem pretty simple, but the shooting positions are not easy. We used tubing and different sort of slits that we made with wood in order to put the shooter into an awkward shooting position. The reality is, oftentimes in the real world, you might not have the most perfect shooting position, and you might have to engage through different sort of obstacles. So this was a really good way to test people's ability to get into a shooting position, find the eye box for their optic, and make sure that they can get hits on targets. And while the targets aren't super far away, the real difficulty comes from getting into those positions because they are very small and can be difficult to navigate. A handful of people did say that this was their favorite drill, and I can absolutely see why, because it is pretty cool to be able to get into these different positions. Now, for future Exodus events, we're going to have something very similar, and as you'll see in other stages in this event, we are going to have more difficult shooting positions, because that's kind of, well, frankly, it's fun, and number 2, it's a really good test, because most people don't train in those awkward shooting positions. All right, moving on to our 5th stage. This stage is actually really fun and pretty interesting. I got the idea from watching some Finnish Brutality, and I think this was probably one of the more favorited stages of the day. It's very, very simple. This one is called the minefield. Procedure is as follows. There are 4 color-coordinated cardboard targets downrange with 2 different sets of steel. On the buzzer, the shooter must advance to the first tire position, lay in the prone, and engage the first color on their color card. So again, making sure that they have their intel cards from previous in the day. After the shooter has engaged their properly colored cardboard target, they must engage both of the steel targets before getting up and running to the next prone tire position. They will repeat this process until they're at the last tire, at which point they will stand up, advance to the safety pallet, drop their rifle, which will be promptly cleared by an RSO, grab 2 cinder blocks, and advance back through the minefield to the deposit location. Once they deposit the cinder blocks, the time is up. Now you might say, well, that sounds pretty easy. Well, the fun part is that we actually got the shooting clays, the shotgun clays, the small clay pigeons, We flipped them upside down so that they were black against the pretty thick grass, and we scattered them all throughout the area. And if you broke one, whether by stepping on it, whether by laying in the prone, well, unfortunately, you got a pretty hefty time penalty. So this stage is really good for forcing you to watch your step. You can't just beeline it to the next shooting position. You actually have to be a bit more careful and a bit more focused on where you're stepping, which should be clear, that's pretty effective in the real world, as your terrain is not just going to be smooth and flat. So since this was such a coveted stage and everyone seemed to really enjoy it, we'll probably have something very similar in future Exodus events. Like I said, it is kind of difficult to see the clay pigeons. We did have an RSO who was explicitly positioned to watch for clay pigeons being broken. And like I said, people could break them from laying in the prone. We had that happen a couple of times. They could break them while they were running to the next position. It was really interesting. And we strategically placed these mines so that it would be difficult for you to lay prone in certain positions. And it would force you to kind of contort your body in different ways. So it really plays into the whole effect of trying to make sure that you are cognizant of everything, your kit, your gear, yourself, while you're completing the stage. And yes, if your kit or gear falls, or something falls out of your backpack and breaks a clay pigeon, that's also a time penalty. And they're pretty hefty time penalties.
Feet inside. You're good. You're good. Feet are good.
Now for the sixth and final stage. This one I think was also a pretty well favorited one. as it is allowing people to shoot very fast in a lot more of a USPSA style setup. So we had a small shoot house. We did the best with the resources that we had. So in the future, expect bigger and more grandiose shoot houses while still being safe. This stage also has a very high round count. There's a ton of targets that you just kind of have to burn down. Now, as you're watching this footage, you're also going to see people probably shooting. You're going to see one guy shoot with a pistol, everyone else shoot with a rifle. This particular stage, we didn't specify what you had to shoot, but I think in future events we will have to, because some people might use it to gain an unfair advantage. So the procedure is as follows. Rifles will start in the low ready position, pistols will start holstered. On the buzzer, the shooter will have to clear the shoot house first. So they can clear that in whatever way they see fit. There's several different fault lines that prevent them from going in certain areas, but they are going to have to manipulate their rifle or their pistol in a somewhat enclosed environment. And the way that we've positioned a lot of the targets is to force people to have to navigate around in doorways. Now you're also going to see that we have some clay pigeons that are set up too. These are just, I don't know, we had extra ones, so I thought it would kind of be fun to shoot. They're very low percentage targets. They have to be shot and break in order for you to not get a penalty. After the shooter clears the shoot house, they are going to sprint backwards to the rifle deposit point. After they deposit that rifle, and even if they're running a pistol, they are going to just pick up a kettlebell with one hand, and they are going to have to advance to the blue shooting position, of which they'll have to shoot 2 cardboard targets and a steel target before advancing to the next green position and shooting the 2 green cardboard targets. Now, the entire time that they are doing this, they do have to hold on to that kettlebell. I think a lot of people enjoyed this because they got to shoot very fast, and then they also got a pretty big challenge from having to shoot while holding something heavy. Even though the kettlebell was only 30 pounds, it can still be difficult to maintain a good shooting grip while carrying that weight. In the future, we're going to have very similar stages to this. In fact, we want to have more similar stages to this because a lot of people like to burn down super fast, but they still should have some sort of physical capability baked into the stage. So this is a highly coveted stage and one that is going to appear in some variation in the future. And after everyone was done with this final stage, we wrapped up. We had a quick debrief, make sure that there was anything that people saw that they thought needed changed or, had an improvement on or thought could have been done better. We took that feedback into account, and that's where I gained some of my feedback from the previous video. Now, this particular event was actually sponsored by Siley, so big shout out to Siley. We very much appreciate that. They also sent out a couple of red dots for us to give to the winners. So first and second place both got a Siley. I believe they got the Siley Wolf 0, or maybe the Wolf, I can't remember the exact model designation, but they both got Sileys. In the future, we want to do something similar. I actually did have some trophies made for this event, but I forgot them in Indiana, unfortunately. So in the future, we will have trophies and other sponsored. And for the person who got last place, we also sent them a care package. So I hope that you guys enjoyed seeing this footage from Tennessee Exodus. Make sure to stay subscribed to our YouTube channel and check out our website. Get on the newsletter subscription as well, so that we can send emails to you about new upcoming stuff with PA, but also upcoming Exodus events. We're working very hard to make the next event go even smoother and be even better. So keep an eye out for that. I will see you in the next video, and remember, stay armed.
I'm much more about the physical aspect. Is there anything else we can add for physically torturing you?
Yeah, or subtract.
Longer distance.
Run the opposite way, run up.
Okay.
Running up is actually not a bad idea. Not a bad idea.
I like the shooting pistol with the kettlebell. Yeah. And like running, like moving with the weight in one hand, gun in the other hand. I like that because that actually makes it actively harder to shoot the gun like right there instead